When he was a boy, the preacher and writer John Ashworth helped out in the warehouse of a grocery shop, 2 doors from his family's cottage at Cutgate in Rochdale. The shopkeeper's niece was a proud young woman called Nanny, who was always overly concerned about her looks. Apparently the other young women in the village tried to curl their hair to be like Nanny, but none of them could compete with her, and she held her head above the rest. In one of his strange tales, The Lost Curl, John Ashworth describes how he was once helping in the warehouse as a boy, and he heard Nanny scream next door. He was so frightened by the scream that he ran to see what had happened. He found Nanny the very picture of despair, as she had accidentally burned off a large lock of her hair while she was using some curling tongs. Nanny was full of indignation and set about combing her hair again in the mirror. When her aunt, the shopkeeper, realised what was the matter, she shouted at Nanny, saying that if she lived, she'd have something more to scream about than the loss of a few hairs from her head. Nanny's real name was Anne Bury. In 1825, she married a blacksmith from Clapgate called Robert Leach. They got married at St Chad's Church in Rochdale, and they went on to have 2 children, a son called James and a daughter called Selina. Robert became a shopkeeper and had a malt business, but he became an alcoholic and ran off to America. Robert and Nanny's 2 children stayed in Rochdale, and Nanny moved to Bolton, but she continued to be ruled by her love of finery. In 1842 she was put in prison for stealing a shawl and a pair of boots. John Ashworth described his sadness as Nanny was brought from the cell to the dock on the day of the trial, and how she gave a wild, piercing shriek which sent a thrill of pain through the entire court, and she fell senseless into the arms of the jailer when she was found guilty and sentenced to be transported for 7 years. The records show that Nanny was transported on the 2nd of October 1842. She travelled on a ship called Garland Grove and arrived at Hobart in Australia on the 20th of January 1843. Nanny's convict record gives a detailed description of her, including her height, 5'3", and her features. She had a round chin and a pale complexion, light brown eyebrows and hazel eyes, medium height forehead and light brown hair, a small head, small mouth, long nose and long visage. It even says that she had a small cut on her left thumb, and that she could read but couldn't write. On the record she said she had 2 children, and even though Robert was still alive at this point, she claimed to be a widow. Nanny had to have all her hair cut off to comply with the rules of the prison, which greatly humbled her. Her convict record shows that she was freed not long afterwards, and that she made an application to marry someone in 1843. John Ashworth said he knew little of what happened to Nanny after she was transported to Australia, except to say that she apparently became very meek, obedient, and kind to everyone, and made many friends, that she never smiled but often read her Bible, and then her health failed her, and she gradually sunk into a comparatively early tomb. Nanny's husband, Robert, returned to Rochdale some time later. Again he lived at Clapgate, but this time with a lady called Jane Leach, although they don't appear to have been officially married, and Robert was an innkeeper. But he suffered from the effects of alcoholism, and on the 8th of July 1854 he drowned himself at Croston Close near Lum Mill in the valley of Cheesden. After the inquest into his death, Robert was buried at St Clement's Church in Scotland. Robert and Nanny's children James and Selina remained in Rochdale. They both got married and had children of their own, but Selina died at the age of 30. John Ashworth wrote an account of Robert and Nanny's story and included it in the 3rd series of his famous Strange Tales, which was first published in 1867. In the tale, Mr. Ashworth said He never forgot the lesson he learned from what happened to Robert and Nanny, and especially what Nanny's aunt, the shopkeeper, had said to the proud young woman on the day she had screamed over the lost curl.